He measured the walls. Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa walked the perimeter of Vienna in his mind long before his army arrived. In his private correspondence, he spoke of the city as though it already belonged to him. He had decided where he would put his palace. He was not wrong to feel confident. 150,000 men marched at his command. The largest army the Ottoman Empire had mobilized in a generation. Behind them, a supply line crossing 3 empires. Ahead of them, a city of 90,000 civilians, defended by 15,000 soldiers, slowly running out of food. The gates of Western Europe stood before him, barely open. What Kara Mustafa did not know, could not have known, was that 900 kilometers away, a Polish king was already moving, quietly, without announcement, with 18,000 of the most feared cavalry soldiers in the world. September 12, 1683. One afternoon changed everything. To understand Vienna in 1683, you must understand what it represented. Not just a city, a threshold. The Habsburg Empire stretched across Central Europe, Catholic, ancient, exhausted. For a century, it had absorbed pressure from every direction: Protestant rebellions, French ambition, and above all, the Ottoman tide pressing westward from Constantinople. Vienna was the last major fortified city between the Ottoman frontier and the heart of Western Europe. The Ottomans had tried before. In 1529, Suleiman the Magnificent besieged Vienna and failed. That failure was never forgotten, not by the Ottoman court, not by the European diplomats who watched the eastern horizon with quiet dread every spring. By 1683, the Ottoman Empire was enormous. It stretched from Morocco to the Persian Gulf, from the Black Sea to the gates of Poland. At its center, a new force, a Grand Vizier named Kara Mustafa, calculating and relentless, with the ear of Sultan Mehmed IV and a vision of westward expansion that made his predecessors seem cautious. Kara Mustafa wanted Vienna, not for the Sultan, for himself. The difference mattered. A campaign sanctioned by the Sultan was a state enterprise measured, provisioned with clear objectives. What Kara Mustafa launched in the spring of 1683 was something more personal, something dangerous. He promised the Sultan it would be swift. He promised his generals it would be glorious. No one asked what happened if it was neither. In Vienna, Emperor Leopold I, a thin, anxious man who preferred music to war, understood the danger. He sent his family out of the city in June. Then he followed. He left behind Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg, steady, experienced, and under no illusions about what was coming. Starhemberg watched the horizon. He did not wait long. They came in July. The Ottoman columns stretched so far that the last troops could not see the first. 150,000 men, 40,000 camels. Artillery enough to unmake a wall in a single afternoon. They arrived on the 14th of July, 1683. The city saw them coming. Starhemberg ordered the suburbs burned, every building outside the walls erased. Nothing that could shelter an enemy, nothing that could mask an approach. The citizens who had not already fled watched their neighborhoods disappear in smoke. No one spoke. The Ottomans did not charge the walls. That was the first thing Vienna learned. Kara Mustafa had no intention of a direct assault. He was not interested in losing 50,000 men against stone fortifications. He was going to go under them. The Ottoman Engineering Corps began digging the night they arrived. Trenches, tunnels, a slow mechanical hunger eating toward the foundations of Vienna's walls, week after week, meter by meter. Starhemberg could hear it, everyone in Vienna could hear it, the scrape of tools. The distant thud of packed earth moved, sound that never stopped, not during the day, not at night, not in the early hours before dawn, when the mind makes it louder than it is. One mistake and everything changes. Starhemberg's engineers dug counter-tunnels. They tried to intercept the Ottoman trenches underground, to collapse them, to slow them. Some days it worked. Some days the ground simply shook. Another section of wall trembled, and the men above crossed themselves and returned to watching. The siege entered its second week, then its fourth, then its sixth. The food was running low: 90,000 civilians, 15,000 soldiers, shrinking supplies. Starhemberg kept order by keeping people busy. Every civilian who could work was assigned a post. Women carried ammunition. Elderly men repaired walls at night by torchlight. Children watched for fire because Ottoman sappers had begun sending incendiary devices over the walls, trying to create panic from within. The panic came anyway, just quietly. There were no grand speeches inside Vienna, no rousing declarations. What there was Starhemberg walking the walls every morning, checking every post, visible every day, refusing to behave like a man who believed he was losing. He did not believe he was losing, but he knew the mathematics. The tunnels were getting closer. 3 sections of wall had already been weakened. The garrison was exhausted, and somewhere in Europe an army was hopefully being assembled to come to their relief. He had sent riders out before the Ottomans completed their encirclement. Had they gotten through? Were the messages received? Was anyone coming? No answer came back. Silence is part of the strategy. Across the siege lines, Kara Mustafa sat in his command tent, surrounded by carpets, hanging lamps, and the trappings of a man who had already won. He received delegations. He planned the post-siege administration. He argued internally with his own commanders about whether to allow a general assault. His generals wanted to storm the walls directly, accept the casualties, end it quickly. Kara Mustafa refused. He wanted Vienna intact. An assault would damage the city. The city he had already decided was his. History always collects its debts. 700 kilometers north, something remarkable was happening. Pope Innocent XI had been writing letters for months, urgent letters with money enclosed. He was assembling what he called the Holy League, a coalition of Christian powers willing to march to Vienna's relief. The problem was politics. The Holy Roman Empire was fragmented, suspicious, and slow. France, under Louis XIV, refused to participate Vienna's fall-suited French ambitions in Central Europe. The German princes agreed in theory and argued over command in practice. There was one man who said yes without conditions. Jan III Sobieski, King of Poland, decorated military commander, a man who had spent his entire career fighting the Ottomans on the eastern frontier, agreed to lead the relief force. He came not with promises. He came with 18,000 winged hussars. The hussars were the most recognizable soldiers in Europe. Heavy cavalry, armored lancers. Each one rode into battle with great arched wings mounted behind their saddle, an apparatus that created a terrifying roar in the charge, designed to break the nerve of horses and men alike before the lances ever connected. No army had fought them and forgotten the experience. Sobieski moved south from Poland in August. He merged his force with the Imperial Army and the German contingent along the way. By the time he reached the Kahlenberg Ridge overlooking Vienna, he commanded 70,000 men. He arrived on the 11th of September. Vienna had been under siege for 59 days. Sobieski climbed the Kahlenberg Ridge at night. From there, in the darkness, he could see everything. The Ottoman camp below, massive, sprawling, lit by 10,000 campfires. The city of Vienna beyond it, dark and quiet and still breathing. Between the two, the terrain, the slope, the forest edge, the open ground where a charge could build momentum before the Ottomans had time to form. He studied it for a long time. Then he made his decision. Dawn. From the ridge, straight down, his commanders raised concerns. The slope was uneven. The forest would break formation. The Ottoman artillery was well positioned. Surely a more cautious approach, Sobieski cut them off. If we wait, Vienna dies. If we wait, the Ottomans fortify the slope. If we wait, we have already lost. No one argued further. That night inside Vienna, a message was fired over the walls by arrow. The relief army was here. The attack would come at dawn. Hold. Starhemberg read it twice. Then he went back to the walls. Inside the Ottoman command tent, Kara Mustafa knew the relief army had arrived. He had known for 3 days. His commanders urged him to turn and meet them before they could organize. He hesitated. One mistake and everything changes. He ordered his sappers to work through the night, to collapse the tunnel beneath Vienna's wall before dawn. If the city fell, the relief army would arrive to rubble. It almost worked. At 2 in the morning, a massive section of Vienna's wall collapsed. Starhemberg threw every reserve he had into the breach. Civilians, off-duty soldiers, anyone who could hold a weapon. They plugged the gap with their bodies and held it through the dark hours, held it until dawn. 12 September, 1683. Dawn came grey and cold over the Kahlenberg Ridge. The slope below lay still in shadow. Sobieski was already mounted. At 6 in the morning, the Imperial infantry began moving down from the ridge on the left flank. The German contingent descended on the right. A vast, slow movement of 40,000 men pressing through the forest and into the Ottoman flank positions. The Ottomans responded. They had to. Kara Mustafa split his forces, part to hold Vienna, part to face the relief army. It was the correct decision, but it meant neither force was now strong enough for what it faced. The fighting on the slopes was brutal. All morning, the Ottomans were not a weak army. They were 150,000 experienced soldiers who understood they were fighting for their lives. The Imperial and German forces gained ground slowly, painfully. But they gained it. By midday, the Ottoman left flank was crumbling. By 2 in the afternoon, a gap appeared in the Ottoman center. Sobieski saw it. He did not hesitate. At 3 in the afternoon on the 12th of September 1683, King Jan III Sobieski of Poland led the largest cavalry charge in recorded history, 18,000 horsemen. They moved in formation from the ridge. A wall of armored bodies and lances. The great feathered wings roared as they descended. The sound reached the Ottoman camp before the riders did. It reached Vienna before that. The Ottoman cavalry moved to meet them. No one speaks, no one moves too soon. The hussar formation did not slow. It did not break. It came down the slope at full gallop, 18,000 horses, 18,000 riders, accelerating, and the sound was something that none of the men who survived it could ever fully describe to people who had not been there. The Ottoman line broke, not slowly, not partially, it broke completely. In 20 minutes, perhaps fewer, the Ottoman center collapsed. Soldiers who had held siege lines for 60 days threw down their equipment and ran. The retreat became a rout. The rout became a catastrophe. Kara Mustafa ran. He left behind his tent, his carpets, his hanging lamps, his correspondence, the plans for his Vienna palace. He left behind everything and rode east as fast as his horse could carry him. Vienna was free. Starhemberg emerged from the city at dusk. He walked through the abandoned Ottoman camp past cooking fires still burning, past tents inhabited that morning, past wealth accumulated over months of absolute confidence, and said nothing for a long time. Sobieski entered Vienna the next morning. The citizens who remained came out to meet him. 60 days of siege, 40 days of dwindling food, 20 days of listening to tunnels beneath their feet, and then in an afternoon it was over. Sobieski wrote to his wife that night, "God and the Lord have given the victory and the glory to our nation. All the guns, the whole camp, untold spoils have fallen into our hands." He was not wrong, but he may not have understood the full weight of what he had written. Victory belongs to the one who waits. Kara Mustafa rode east. He reached Belgrade in December. On Christmas Day, 1683, he received visitors, envoys from the Sultan. They carried a single item, a silk cord. In the Ottoman court, a silk cord delivered to a defeated commander meant one thing. Kara Mustafa understood. He performed his prayers. He sat quietly. Then he gave the order not to resist. They strangled him in his tent. His head was sent to Constantinople in a velvet bag. The Sultan received it, said nothing, filed it away. The Ottoman Empire did not collapse that day. Empires do not collapse in a day. But something broke, something structural, something at the core that December afternoon in Belgrade. The army that had seemed unstoppable had been stopped. The general who had guaranteed victory was dead in a bag. The walls of Vienna still stood. In the years that followed, the consequences accumulated. Hungary, held by Ottoman forces for 150 years, was reconquered by the Habsburgs within 20. The Balkan territories followed. The Ottoman frontier retreated. Year by year, decade by decade, the empire that had once stretched from Morocco to the Persian Gulf began slowly to contract. There would be more Ottoman wars, more battles, more treaties signed and broken, but there would never be another attempt on Vienna. The door had closed. What does it mean, a single afternoon? History teaches us to think in centuries, in dynasties, in the slow movement of populations and resources and ideas across generations. We learn to distrust the idea that one moment can change everything. And then we look at September 12, 1683. If Kara Mustafa had not hesitated, if the wall had collapsed 1 hour earlier, if Sobieski had arrived 1 day later, if the Hussar charge had broken against a prepared defense, a different Europe, perhaps a different world, not better or worse, we cannot know that, but profoundly, irreversibly different. What actually happened was this. An empire at its absolute peak, wielding its full power, was stopped by determined defense, political will, and 18,000 men who charged a hill at exactly the right moment. Starhemberg survived. He was celebrated, promoted, made a hero of the Habsburg court. He had held 60 days when no one was certain he could hold 10. Sobieski returned to Poland. Honored across a continent he had saved. History always collects its debts. But sometimes rarely, and only for a moment, it allows the debtor to walk away. Vienna was that moment. The Ottomans never forgot it. Their court documents from the years after 1683 return again and again to that afternoon. What went wrong? Who was to blame? How 150,000 men came back without the city they had been promised? The answer they never quite settled on was the simplest one. They were stopped. That is all. They were stopped. And sometimes that is enough to change everything. The walls of Vienna still stand. Not the same walls rebuilt, restored, reshaped by centuries of peace, but stand, and in them, somewhere in the stone and mortar, is the memory of 60 days. Of hands that held weapons they were not certain they could hold. Of a king who rode down a hill because the alternative was unthinkable. Of an afternoon that became a turning point. Empires fall. They always fall. But the moment before the fall, when everything hangs in the balance and the outcome is genuinely uncertain, that is where human beings reveal who they are. Vienna revealed itself, and the world that came after was built on that answer. Crown and Ruin explores the rises and falls that shaped the world we inherited. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. There are more empires ahead, more thresholds, more afternoons that changed everything. The next one is coming soon.